Hi Jaworek School, it's me, Ms. McNichol. Welcome to episode number 16 of Goodnight Jaworek School. In today's episode, we have another guest reader. She's going to be reading to you a story called Extra Yarn. I can relate to that because I have a big box of yarn and I'm busy knitting, getting ready for the cold weather. Sit back, relax, and enjoy Extra Yarn.
My name's Agatha and I'm in 4th grade. And today I'm going to be reading this story, Extra Yarn. Extra Yarn. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where everywhere you looked was either the white snow or the black of soot from the chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled of yarn of every color. So she went home and knit a sweater for herself, and Annabelle was done. She had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too, but there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Nordman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pelton, and for Mrs. Pelton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone, except for Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shore with the snow up to his knee. "No sweater for me." "Thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then Annabelle still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats, and for other animals too. Soon people thought Annabelle would run out of yarn, but it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an Archduke, who was very fond of clothes, sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the Archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to offer you $1 million. No thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The Archduke's mustache twitched. $2 million, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No thanks." $10 million, shouted the Archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sew the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, the Archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box, and it took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea back to his castle. The Archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and lifted its lid, and he looked inside. His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The Archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You'll never be happy again." But it turned out she was. I pick extra yarn because I love making stuff with yarn. It's like colorful and all that stuff, and I make stuff with yarn. I like to learn how to knit one day, and maybe Miss McNichol will teach me.
Now let's find out how we get that yarn from the wool of a sheep.
What you need today to make yarn? Well, you're gonna need wool, so I suggest getting a hold of a sheep. Free barber service? Yeah. So, what you need besides wool is just a few items. You're gonna need a bowl or a plastic vessel of some sort. Tupperware is fine. Something about twice the size of the amount of wool you want to wash. This small amount of wool for demonstration purposes, we're just gonna use a plastic bowl I have. Now to wash the wool, all you need is your basic detergent dish soap, the kind of stuff you use to fight grease and bacteria on your pots and pans. Hey dealer, I'm gonna need 2 cards. Get it? These are cards. They're called carding tools. And these are made specifically to straighten out those kinky and curly fibers naturally found in sheep wool and make it into fiber you can spin. I'll show you how to card later, but if you notice, these look a lot like slicker brushes you may see for your dogs or cats in pet stores. A good pair of cards made to handle wool. These can cost upwards of $50. Dog brushes on sale at the dollar store. Not a bad way to start. This spinning wheel is a spinning wheel. This is a dowel rod bought from the hardware store. A wooden wheel meant for kids' toys. And on the end, there's a little hook that was screwed in. That's it. Some wood glue right here, about 2 inches from one end. A hook on the other end. That's it. This makes yarn, which makes hats and gloves and scarves. You can make clothing with this. Isn't that crazy? The first step is to add water to your bowl. Not a lot. The second step, thanks turkeys, is to add soap to your water. Not a lot. The last step is to add the wool to your water. Now, what I'm going to do is just use my hand to press down and pat this wool. I am not going to swish it. I am not going to agitate it, because agitating wool causes felting. All you see here is this ramen noodly mess of wool, water, and mild soap. That's it. So what we have here is some washed clean wool. This was done at Antler Stock on Saturday, and I know what you're thinking. It looks just like the dirty wool, right? Well, it's not. It's entirely different, and the reason is that soaking bath and detergents, while it may not look very, different since it was the clean wool off the back of the sheep, it is different because this doesn't have lanolin on it, or at least not very much. Lanolin is the natural oil found in sheep. On their back, it's what makes them so weatherproof and comfy. We've taken the lanolin and the oils of the sheep out of this, as well as any flakes of skin or any other little nasty bits. This right here is ready to card. What you're going to do is take your clean wool that's dried and set it on your card. See how it naturally sticks to it? I am just sticking it so that the teeth grab it like Velcro. Look at that. Now, if you look closely, and trust me, this is no magical, fancy hand spinner method. I know there are many of you in the comments who can leave much better ways to do this. For demonstration purposes, we put wool that's all kinky and, curly and unruly on the hand spinner. Here's the before shot. Now we take our other card, and starting tip to tip, I'm going to start carding. I'm pulling back and forth with the carder to turn that unruly wool into something a little different. In just a few strokes, look what's starting to happen, guys. That kinky weird wool is starting to become individual fibers. Usually there's more skill involved, but holding up 2 cards in front of a laptop camera in a sheep field makes it look like I have a couple extra chromosomes involved in the process. Just a few minutes of carding, that fuzzy kinky wool has turned into this. And you take it off, like so. And what you're left with, guys, is, if you can believe it, this beautiful, wispy, ready to spin roving. Technically this is a rolag. That's what a little roving turd is called. However, I can show you right now how to turn this into yarn. So here's the star of the show, the drop spindle. As you can see, I tied on some yarn. Any yarn will do to start with. It doesn't have to be hand spun. Any kind of natural yarn that you can ply apart into smaller fibers. It's tied on here. It's kind of wound around and spun here. And this here is just going up and onto our hook. See how the hook is holding that? See how it's already spinning like magic? So, you spin this. So you give this a good spin. This is a spinning wheel. End of yarn. Are you checking this out? End of yarn from the drop spindle. Loose fibers from the rolag. I am pinching the yarn and loose fibers together as I spin. Now, what happens is, you see how they start to bind together? This isn't pretty. That's yarn. It just wants to twist. It naturally wants to twist. And so what you end up with is yarn.
Good night, Jaworek School. Late in the evening on Hosmer Street, where all the cool kids have been tapping a beat, they lay in their beds, not one of them a fool, when we all say goodnight to Jaworek School. We go to class and learn something new. We chat with our friends and our teachers too. We share our school spirit. We share what we know. Then just after 3 o'clock it's time to go. In Jaworek School, at the end of the day, when all of the students have gone home to play, we close all the windows and put down our tools as we say good night to Jaworek School. Good night to the teachers, good night to the halls, good night to the artwork hanging on the walls, good night to the books and our principals too, good night to JJ dressed all in blue, good night to the gym where we climb and run, good night to the playscape where we have fun, good night to the numbers, good night to the words, good night to all of the stories we heard. In Jaworek School, at the end of the day, when all of the students have gone home to play, we close all the windows and put down our tools as we say good night to Jaworek School. Thanks to Agatha for reading Extra Yarn. Remember, Jaworek School, keep reading. Good night, Jaworek School.